Good Thursday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports for CLE. Hope you're having a great afternoon. Thanks for joining us. We do know the Browns' schedule. We know who, when, where, why. So let's take a look at it. We knew the Browns were opening at home against the Cowboys. Jaguars, Giants, Raiders, Commanders, Eagles. Then 3 games before the bye week. That Chargers game is at home, so that's a misprint on the schedule. That Week 9 game is at home. Chargers come into Cleveland, so it's Bengals, Ravens, Chargers at home. Then they go to the bye week, and things get a little bit more interesting at the end of this schedule. You go Steelers, Chiefs, Bengals, Dolphins, Ravens to close out. Let's welcome in Quincy Carrier, Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. Quincy, you look at the schedule, the end of it obviously concerns me. It's pretty brutal when you go Chiefs, Bengals, Dolphins, Ravens, throw in the Steelers. Those are all playoff contending type teams. But new offensive system, you kind of ease into it a little bit after the Cowboys maybe.
Well, you know, it's interesting because those games are at the last 4 weeks of the season. They either will be the most important games for those contending teams of the year or the least important games for those contending teams. Like, if both are on the table, the Chiefs could get a giant lead in the division, which is possible. I mean, that division's not very strong, and they might not really be playing for much by week 15. We don't know where the Bengals are going to be sitting by Thursday night. The same thing could be true with the Dolphins, as their division is a bit more of a toss-up. It's just one of those things where you just have to wait and see, but I do think that the Browns, the way this schedule plays out, because you have that first stretch of impressive games that you have where you play the Eagles, the Bengals, the Ravens, and Chargers, those are all 1 o'clock Sunday games, and they're in October, and we know that those October games aren't nearly weighted as much as those November, December games as far as how people view you. So this Browns team, like, they could go into Week 14 with a really strong record, but I think it's going to take that last stretch of the season, them having like a 3-1 run there, for people to actually take them seriously.
Yeah, the other thing that jumps out, you don't face the Steelers until Week 12, and you get them in Weeks 12 and 14. They got some quarterback things to figure out in Pittsburgh. You know, is it Wilson? Is it Fields? They'll probably know by then.
Yeah, I wonder if that's going to be a good thing for the Browns, right? Because I think you want to get the Steelers while Russell's starting for them. I think that's going to be the worst version of that team, because Russ doesn't even bring that mobile element anymore. And I think he is such a domineering force when it comes to who Russell Wilson is and what he's done, that the Steelers are going to feel compelled to go away from what they're good at with him on the field, right? Like, they're going to throw the ball 40, 50 times, and I don't think that fits them when Russ is out there, versus if Justin Fields is out there, that pressure to throw the ball decreases significantly, and now Pittsburgh is playing the football that they want to. But I don't know if you've gotten a chance to look at that back-end schedule for Pittsburgh. They get 1 game after the bye against the Commanders, and it's a murderer's row for them. So who knows what shape they'll be in by the time the Browns play them, because that's just a rough deal that they got there.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. 3 of the 4 toughest schedules in the NFL are in the AFC North, so it's equally distributed. I'm curious, you've addressed this on your show. What do you think the 2024 Browns schedule tells us about the future?
Tells me one thing about the Browns and one thing about the NFL. One, the network priorities are changing, because these Monday Night Football games feel mandatory. Like, they don't feel like they're getting the big games anymore, which is interesting, because Thursday Night Football seems to be getting the more significant matchups. I mean, you're getting a Browns-Steelers game on Thursday Night Football late in the year, and then you're also getting a Browns-Bengals game on Thursday Night Football. You're getting 2 of those games. Like, that seems like a premium spot now for a national TV game, which might change how we view this. Another thing that the schedule tells me is that these are a lot of backloaded off-day national TV games that the Browns have, right? Thursday, Monday. And those games can't be flexed. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, right? I think it's only the Sunday games that can really be flexed after the flex point of the season. So that tells me that there's a lot of trust from the schedule makers that the Browns will be a contending team at the very least, or at least a team in that playoff picture.
I think last year they started you could flex Monday night with like 2 or 3 weeks. There are a couple of weeks, and I'm not sure if it's the ones that the Browns are in, where you can flex them from Monday to Sunday, but it's like a 3-week window that you have to. There has to be a notification in advance. So we'll see.
And it has to be like a drastic, like, oh, we
Right.
got 2 of the worst teams in the league playing it. Sometimes they'll still let it fly on national TV.
All right, this from the Bleacher Report. Record predictions for every NFL team after the schedule were released. For the Browns, they go 8-9. Cleveland has an 8-4 record when Watson starts, but with Chubb still on the mend, one has to wonder if Watson can do enough to lead the Browns back to the postseason. The schedule's tough. If everything
It was tough last year.
If everything goes wrong, yeah, maybe. But somewhere between that 8 and 11 wins is where I think they end up again.
I mean, the schedule was tough last year, and literally everything went wrong for this team last year. You lost your quarterback, you lost your 2 tackles, you lost your running back. They still won 11 games. You did just lose 1 quarterback. Like, we lost like 2 quarterbacks during the stretch of this thing. So, it's just going to be a constant while Watson's here until he has one of those full seasons where the Browns win a bunch of games. People are always going to question whether he's going to be good enough to justify whatever you want to justify with him. But come on, man, 8-9. This team's not an 8-9 football team. I think this is at worst, 10-win to 9-win team. That's where the expectation should be. This is going to be a playoff team, or at the very least, even if things go wrong. I know the schedule's tough, but the schedule was tough last year. I know you play the Chiefs this year, but you got the 49ers last year, right? And then you played the Rams when they were at their hottest point of the season. So, the tough schedule is nothing new, and I don't think that should sway much from what happened last year, because this team, again, they kind of proved it last year. They're better than what people are expecting right now, because 8-9 is a little ridiculous.
All right, this from the Browns. They're tweeting out their preseason schedule, too, so we know that as well. It'll be the Packers at home, August 10th. Vikings at home, August 17th, and the Seahawks, which will be a West Coast trip, August 24th. The Vikings week will be joint practices as well, so probably won't see many people. Typically, if you're going through a couple of days of practice against the ones-on-ones, you don't see a lot of those guys playing in that second preseason game either.
Yeah, I mean, they've pretty much got a pattern down, right, by now of what they like to do in the preseason, since they switched to the 3-game format. And it's going to be funny, right, when we get used to that, it's probably when they're going to switch to the 2-game format for the preseason. But you're going to get probably a drive or 2 out of the starters in week 1. Maybe Deshaun's playing, maybe not. I doubt it this year. And in week 2, you get nothing as far as like starters in that game. And then the week 3 game will be the dress rehearsal that they kind of have guys play a little bit longer. It's kind of the pattern they settled into. I just appreciate that they told us the preseason schedule instead of like telling us to wait a week so they can drop it again like they did the last couple of years. Just glad they did it all one drop. It was bad enough they made us watch a TV special to get the record, so to get the schedule. So.
All right, this is good. This is a good sign. So Nick Chubb at Berry College in Rome, Georgia, and that is him running. So Nick Chubb, again, trying to get as healthy as he can, work his way back from that knee injury, and moving pretty good for a guy that is not far removed from significant knee surgery. But again, wouldn't bet against Nick Chubb. They are going to really, really, really slow play bringing him back, I think. And we've talked about this. You want him in January, theoretically, when you're in playoff games. You find a way to work around it in September and October till he is back as full strength as he can be.
Yeah, I mean, part of him getting back full strength is going to be him having to play some football and getting hit, right, and getting used to that. I would say this, too, like, it's exciting to see him sprint, but in reality, we know with ACL tears, it's more about the lateral movement than it is about the straight line stuff, right? So he's going to be able to sprint relatively soon in his recovery window. The question's going to be like, where is he when it comes to lateral movement? Can he plant and accelerate and push all that weight that he has off those lateral angles? That's going to be where, if you start to see him doing stuff like that, that's where you start to get excited about if he can come back early. But this is a good step for sure.
Yep, you go from the weightless treadmill to running on hard surface, which is where he's at. Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE. I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Moneymaker from the Ohio Lottery has no interest in beating around the bush. Money Maker. You play the game, you could win money. Up to $2 million. With more than $88 million in prizes from $50 to $500. Moneymaker cuts right to the cash. Unlike this guy.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Yeah, this is Richard calling from Canton, Ohio, and I'm going to go on record and say Coach Stefanski does deserve to be named Coach of the Year, not once but twice. And also, I see Deshaun Watson having a bounce-back year. Ken Dorsey, that offense is going to be great. You're going to have a healthy Nick Chubb, and also you have stability in your backfield. And you have a great defense. So, yes, I see the Browns making noise. And also, the trade of Baker Mayfield, I'm not against him, but I see it made sense. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. And, Quincy, that was in reference to a couple of voicemails we had yesterday relative to Baker and Kevin Stefanski winning Coach of the Year. Let me ask you this. When you look at Deshaun Watson, I know you've addressed this, do you view him as a game manager or game changer?
I don't view it as a binary when it comes to that, right? Like, I think this is a spectrum. And I think we get caught up in placing people in definitive parts of this spectrum when the truth is, when it comes to quarterback play, it's important that a quarterback can move up and down that spectrum with relative flexibility. There's going to be times where you need Deshaun Watson to be a game changer, right? Where he's going to have to break the pocket and make some big plays to get a drive going, to get a game going. That's absolutely going to have to happen. That happened versus Cincinnati. There are also going to be games where you need Deshaun to just take what the defense is giving you, move the ball, let Nick Chubb carry the momentum of the game a little bit, let the offensive line carry the momentum of the game, just get the ball into the hands of the playmakers on the offensive side like David Njoku, Amari Cooper, hopefully Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore as well can add their names to that list, and just let that carry you, right? You saw Pat Mahomes in the playoffs, and we're used to Pat Mahomes being a game changer 9 times out of 10. But the one thing he switched up this year when he realized that he just did not have the tools on offense to do this is he just started to be more of a game manager, allow his defense to kind of dictate the flow of the game. And then, you know, every once in a while in the fourth quarter, hit that knockout blow. That's going to be what you want out of Deshaun Watson. Take care of the football, make sure the defense can shine, make sure your playmakers can shine. And then when it's time to put the game away in the fourth quarter, be the guy who puts the game away in the fourth quarter. It might not lead to amazing stats. He might not have 40 touchdowns. He might not have 5,000 yards passing or whatever. But what you will have is a great record and a winning team that has a chance to win a Super Bowl if he can do that. So I'm not so fixated on the whole game manager, game changer thing. I want to see him be able to adapt to what the team needs, and his willingness to admit that he might have to do that more this year, given what this team has, is a good sign to me.
Yeah, we have heard him say that. We've heard him say as much on his podcast last week, I believe it was. All right, why, again, I know you've addressed this on your show, why do you think we haven't gotten the extensions done for Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski?
I don't think it's like a huge priority. I think they all kind of know that they're incoming. I think Jimmy has gone on record, and they've even published it on the team website that these things are incoming. So I don't think for them, right? For us, we would like to see it because it'll make us feel better and give us something to talk about. But for them, it's like, well, we know it's going to happen. We don't really gotta rush. Like whenever Jimmy's in town and we can get this all hammered out for a couple of days, which is probably going to be when the team's out there in West Virginia at the start of camp, then they'll probably hammer this thing out and get these deals announced. But I just think it's more about, timing and convenience than it is about whether they're going to do it or not. I think it's obvious that the team wants to do it.
All right, this from the Bleacher Report, every offseason's team report card for the Browns. Free agency / trade grade, they give them a B. Draft grade, a B-. Overall or extra credit project, working on a budget, overall grade B. Really, the only questionable move the Browns made was replacing Alex Van Pelt with fired Bills coordinator Ken Dorsey. Offense was more than functional despite starting 5 quarterbacks in 2023, though head coach Kevin Stefanski is the play caller. Well, they're missing the point there. The reason they got rid of Alex Van Pelt is because they're going to change the offense to suit their quarterback. I don't believe that these national narratives keep coming up with this. It's like, do a little research, figure out what you're doing. This offense will have Ken Dorsey's fingerprints all over it.
Yeah, it just screams of a surface level view of the team, right? Like, you took a quick surface level look of it and kind of diagnosed that. The Browns, anybody who's paid attention to this team understands why Alex Van Pelt was moved on from for Ken Dorsey. And like we said at the time, it's not because Alex Van Pelt is a bad offensive coordinator. It's more or less a question of, hey, we haven't done a great job to adjusting this offense to live around the strengths of Deshaun Watson, and we need to bring in more veteran voices in important roles on this offense to collaborate to make something that might better fit Deshaun Watson going forward. I think that's all this was about, but I think that could be something that's easy to miss when you're taking a 10,000 feet view of it instead of boots on the ground like we are.
Yeah, the other thing is other people have done a really good job of drawing the parallels. So Dorsey was under Dable, and you can trace that back to the Bill O'Brien, quote-unquote, Patriots offense that Deshaun Watson ran in Houston, which plays to his strengths. The bottom line is they're playing to what Deshaun Watson does well as a quarterback, or trying to.
Yeah, and they're getting somebody in the building who is familiar with the type of quarterback that Deshaun Watson is. You have to remember, Alex Van Pelt, not somebody who's worked with quarterbacks like Deshaun Watson in the past. Same thing can be said with Kevin Stefanski, not somebody who worked with quarterbacks like Deshaun Watson. So you not only bring in him, you bring in, who is the tight end coach that they brought in? Tommy Rees. Tommy Rees, right? Tommy Rees, who worked with quarterbacks similar to Deshaun Watson in college. You have Ken Dorsey, who's worked with Cam Newton and Josh Allen, both similar to him. Like, you brought in guys who have experience with quarterbacks who have more of an ability to make plays outside of structure versus what Kevin and Alex are used to, which is we create the structure for you to make plays. So there can be less friction in how this thing is designed. I think this is ultimately going to prove itself as one of the smarter moves in the season. We'll see how things go, but I think this is going to be something that works out for them.
Do you think the Browns were aggressive enough in the offseason?
I think they were pretty aggressive, like, given what their situation is. I mean, one, they have one of the best rosters, if not the best roster in the NFL already. Two, so it's hard to be super aggressive when you already want to keep most of the things that you have. But they still were aggressive in adding a wide receiver in Jerry Jeudy. They still were aggressive in keeping the guys that could have walked away, right? Zadarius Smith. And then they even added some starters like Jordan Hicks and even got a guy in the second round, which, hey, look, they haven't drafted in the second round since, was it not Martin Emerson? It was what, JOK, the last guy they drafted in the second round. It's been a little bit of time since they picked there. And they took Michael Hall. I think they were about as aggressive as you could ask them to be, given the circumstance that they're in. And this isn't a team that needed to be super aggressive, right? We would be kind of upset if the Browns were doing things like trading Martin Emerson to get better at a different position because it didn't feel like it would be necessary. I think they were about aggressive as they need it to be and could be.
Quincy Carrier, Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. Now I'm going to step aside, take another timeout, other side of the break. We'll take a look at the Browns' defense and how that lines up with what they're getting ready to face schedule-wise. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. This is interesting. This is from Tony Grossi, longtime Browns beat reporter. He says, look at the Browns schedule this way. Dak Prescott week 1, Trevor Lawrence week 2, Daniel Jones, Gardner Minshew, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Herbert Carr, Russell Wilson, Bo Nix, Russell Wilson, Mahomes, Burrow, Tua, and Lamar Jackson. So those are the quarterbacks they will face. There isn't a Clayton Tune on that list just yet, but you never know as the season goes along. Quincy, can the Browns?
Sure.
Can
Nix.
Can the Browns defense be the best in the NFL again?
Yeah, I mean, like, look, the quarterbacks weren't bad last year that you had to play when you projected them out in Thursday of May last year, right? And the one thing we got to start to be honest about is there, like, when it comes to quarterbacks, you feel like it is an event for you to beat. There is one in the NFL. You do play that one. You play them late in the year in Cleveland, in Patrick Mahomes. But outside of that, like, not really stressing any of the quarterback. We don't know what Russell Wilson's going to be. Like, Russell Wilson could be terrible this year. I wouldn't be surprised. And be honest with you, you're probably playing Justin Fields. And most of the time, like, the Browns have played Justin Fields 2 times in the last 4 years. And we've been licking our chops the last 2 times we've done it. So I don't know why that would change just because he has a Steeler uniform on. Daniel Jones, Gardner Minshew. Is that who they're projecting to start for the Las Vegas Raiders?
Yes, sir.
It might be Aiden O'Connell at that point.
Right.
Like, you know,
yeah.
So it's easy to look at this and say, oh, this is going to be the best case scenario. We're going to have to play all these quarterbacks. We're not going to see a Clayton Tune. But the truth is, Clayton Tune wasn't even a thought of being on that list of quarterbacks when we had the schedule be revealed in May. So things happen. That's kind of what leads you to a Clayton Tune. And the Browns defense wasn't built off of just beating Clayton Tune. They did this to Lamar Jackson. They did this to Brock Purdy. They did this to a lot of big-time quarterbacks. So I'm not going to go in. They did this to Trevor Lawrence, right? So, yeah, I'm not too worried about the quarterbacks that they're playing because I don't really see it as that daunting, to be honest with you. Like, yeah, you got Pat on there. Pat's going to be tough to get. But outside of that, I don't see a single quarterback I don't think this team can't beat.
Well, and the reason you project Minshew as the start, 2 years, $25 million for Gardner Minshew. So they're paying him like a lower end starter. Go figure. All right, this from Pro Football Focus.
Choice.
Breakout candidates for every NFL team. For the Browns, PFF goes with Martin Emerson. Passer rating 53.3 allowed, 4th lowest mark among corners who played 650-plus snaps. However, Emerson was still heavily penalized. If the 23-year-old gets a little less grabby, he could become an outright lockdown perimeter player. Keep in mind, he's still a young guy, so yeah, as you play a little bit, you get more confident, and that's when you grab less as a cornerback. So I would absolutely expect Martin Emerson to be a little less grabby. You don't want him to – physicality is part of his game, though, and you want him to keep that.
Yeah, there's a balance of, like, what you're willing to accept with Martin there. Like, okay, if you get called for it once or twice, you kind of live with it, given that that's kind of what his play style is. I'm surprised because he felt like he was breaking out last year, to be honest with you. So I'm shocked that he's kind of a candidate for this list. But yeah, definitely if you qualify Martin Emerson as somebody who could break out, he could be there. I would throw in JOK on that list too if you feel like somebody can break out. It looked like he was about to break out in the playoffs if the Browns just had a little bit of a better showing.
Yeah, again, I think both those guys played really well. I think if when you say breakout, I think they enter into the all-pro, conversation pretty regularly. Let me ask you this, and I know you've addressed this. What's on the line, and is the Browns' reputation on the line in 2024, do you think?
Yeah, I think when it comes to how they're viewed nationally, look, if you have a bad season this year or you kind of have an embarrassing end to the season this year and you're healthy, they're going to start to look at the whole regime as unserious. Like a team that's going to win games, but unserious. And it's ironic that you play the Cowboys in week 1 because that's kind of the perception of the Dallas Cowboys is a good team. They're going to win probably 10 to 12 games in the regular season, might even be the 1 seed, but ultimately we don't really take them serious, right? Like this is the Browns' chance to decide whether they're going to be taken serious under Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry or whether we're going to be fighting for the legitimacy through good records and stuff throughout the rest of this run.
Yeah, the other thing that's going to be really interesting is the offense. Can the offense get things rolling early enough? Because I think you would agree, it's going to be different. I don't know that it's going to be completely, 180 degrees different. It's going to be pretty significantly different.
I wonder how visual that difference is going to be for us because I think the big change is how they're asking the quarterback to process the offense and how they're asking the wide receivers to process the defense. I think that's going to be the biggest change. And that doesn't necessarily change what route combinations you're running or what packages you throw out there, but it changes who's prioritized in those situations and what gets prioritized. So it's not going to be a massive visual difference, but when it comes to how this thing is processed from the wide receiver and quarterback position, I do think it will be very different.
Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll continue to talk a little bit on the offense, Deshaun Watson, Jack Conklin. Also, interesting, ranking the AFC North rosters. That's straight ahead when Sports4CLE continues. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. So, Quincy, do you think Deshaun Watson did the Browns go out and get him enough help in 2024?
Yeah, I think so. One of the things when it comes to help with a quarterback that I think we underrate because we focus so much on the offensive side of the ball is how well that defense plays. Pat Mahomes is another great example of this, right? The Kansas City Chiefs, you could argue, had nothing at wide receiver, like for the bulk of the season and especially in the postseason. Like absolutely not a single wide receiver you could point to like, yeah, he's dependable. Not one. So you would think he didn't have help. So he can't win a Super Bowl if he doesn't have help. But he did because he had the best defense in the playoffs. And that ended up being enough to carry him to the championship game. Like he still didn't have to do too much. His numbers didn't have to be crazy. His numbers in this year's playoffs are actually the least impressive of any playoff run that he's had, but he was able to get over the hump because he just wasn't asked to do that much. Deshaun Watson, like already has good help with Nick Chubb, with David Njoku, with Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, and all of that. Like, that's going to be great help for him. But the biggest help that he can have is a great defense. And I think a great defense does wonders for quarterback play. And right now, Deshaun projects to have the best defense in the NFL, so he has enough help.
Let me ask you this, and I kind of have a theory. I think one of the biggest additions they made that will help Deshaun Watson is Ken Dorsey. He is a really good quarterback coach who, the more you hear guys like Josh Allen and Cam Newton talk about him, they credit him with kind of keeping their mechanics in line.
Yeah, I mean, he can be helpful with the mechanical stuff. He can be helpful from a game day standpoint. And he could be helpful from the standpoint of just knowing how to make an offense cater it to how Deshaun likes to process the game. And I think that part is most important, right? You want Deshaun to be comfortable processing what he's seeing out there on Sundays, especially since Deshaun's not the type to go on a crusade to get a coach fired. So, he's going to be willing to roll with whatever happens there at coach and try to do his best with it. So you got to make sure when you hire somebody, it is somebody who does suit the strengths of Deshaun Watson.
What about the Jack Conklin? That we keep talking, there's guys that you equate to roughly 3 guys you would feel comfortable with as a starting tackle in the NFL. What do you think the plan is for Conklin?
I'm curious to know what the plan is for him, too. I think the plan should be for him to sit the bench and allow DeJuan Jones to develop and grow at that right tackle position, because I think right now the floor of DeJuan Jones is similar to what the ceiling is. Not the ceiling, but the floor of Jack Conklin. But so if those things are close, I'd rather just go with the young guy, let him grow, and then if something happens, you can plug Jack Conklin in there. I don't think the Browns should try to justify the extension that they have with Jack Conklin by forcing him out there to start, because that might hurt the development of DeJuan Jones. We'll see who gets healthy when. This might not even be a conversation that gets dictated by who's playing better. It might just be dictated by injury. But if the injury stuff is all cleared up by the start of camp, I think it should be DeJuan.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting, and that's a valid point. All 3 of these guys are coming off of surgery, and all 3 of them are different stages of their career. You've got a guy that's been around a little bit, the guy that's getting into his second contract, and the rookie. It very well may be who's healthy enough.
Yeah, it might be who's healthy enough. It might be who has had enough time back to feel comfortable with some of the changes that they're making. Remember, the Browns are not just switching out offensive coordinators, switching out offensive line coach as well. So there might just be some new things that they're running that maybe Jack picks up a little bit faster or much faster than DeJuan does coming off that injury. A lot of things are going to kind of impact how this goes that aren't necessarily purely who's the better player or who has the higher ceiling.
All right, this from Sports Illustrated, ranking every AFC North roster. They go Ravens 1, Bengals 2, Steelers 3, and the Browns 4. Until Deshaun Watson looks like someone even worth half of his cap. Now, what's the argument for Cleveland to be ahead of the Ravens or Bengals? Really, it's battle for third with the Steelers, and although Wilson is clearly on the downside of career, he's still better than Watson, who's been hurt or awful in Cleveland. Yeah, all right.
You taste that salt?
Before we respond to that, I want to call. Let's take a look at this. Since 2020, this is the record within the division. Browns are 12-12 within the division. 3-5 against the Ravens, 3-5 against the Steelers, 6-2 against the Bengals. They mentioned Watson's been hurt or awful. Joe Burrow has played 10 games in 2 of his 4 seasons, 16 in the other 2. And I was surprised by this. Let me ask you this. What do you think Joe Burrow's record is as a starter?
His record, he did not start out winning a ton of football his rookie year. Then they went, 11-5, and they were about 500. So it'd have to be probably around a 600 win percentage.
He's 29-22-1. So he's 7 games over 500 in 4 years. And again, I'm not denigrating Joe Burrow. What I'm saying is the Browns roster is equal to the Ravens and the Bengals, if not ahead of them.
I mean, let's be real about what this article was. This is just, I do not like Deshaun Watson.
Okay.
Therefore, I rank the Browns fourth. Like, this is every word. There was no mention of Myles Garrett. There was no mention of the #1 defense last year. There was no mention of a team that won 11 games throughout 5 different quarterbacks last year. Like, it was all about Deshaun Watson when the Browns had achieved second place last year, despite not having Deshaun Watson play that much last year. So when Deshaun Watson's presence dominates that much of your opinion about the team, when it's debatable whether he's going to be that impactful positively or negatively, quite frankly, it tells me that your feelings on him just kind of dictated where you put the Browns here, because to put the Browns below the Steelers here, like, what justification do you have to put the Browns below the Steelers? Like, you know who put the Browns above the Steelers? The win-loss record last year did, and they were healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, they chose Kenny Pickett. Just remember that. They chose Kenny Pickett.
They were better at the end of the season with the dude behind Kenny Pickett, with Mason Rudolph.
Yeah. Well, I'm with you. All right. What do you think? Things that make Browns fans nervous. Let's start with that. I know you've addressed this on your show as well.
I think left tackle makes Browns fans nervous. Now, I just got done rewatching the San Francisco game, and Jed Wills actually did a really good job against Nick Bosa in that game. But it's the inconsistency of tackle. Also, we're switching protections a little bit, right? Like, if you're going to be running 11 personnel more often, that means you're going to have less help at tight end. That means you're going to leave your tackles on the island, and that might be a problem for Jed, who sometimes has a problem getting beat inside, especially when he has to take wider steps out. And Deshaun doesn't necessarily have the greatest track record of protecting himself or protecting his protections, right? Like, he does not have a great feel for where his depth should be in the pocket in order to kind of avoid getting sacked as often as he does. So I think that's the #1 area where I think Browns kind of get a little nervous is, hey, will this offensive line hold up? Because there were questions about it last year that we didn't get succinct answers on. And you come back this year and you have Jed Wills coming back from an injury, and you don't really feel great about that, but you feel okay with it.
Yeah, the other thing is you lost Bill Callahan. I mean, and again, it's nothing against Andy Dickerson. Bill Callahan, probably the best offensive line coach in the league.
Yeah, and I mean, like, even if Bill Callahan wasn't the best offensive line coach in the league, you're ultimately taking a group of players who were built, developed under one system and switching them into a different system.
What about the offense? And we alluded to this a little bit more. I expect to see more choice routes. I expect to see more RPOs. I expect to see more shotgun. Am I expecting too much?
I don't know about the RPOs, right? That might be a whole, we need to not put Deshaun Watson in a position to get hurt situation where they just kind of leave the RPOs out of it, or not go to them as much. But you're right about those choice routes, right? I think they're going to want Deshaun Watson to have the ability to kind of get to the top of his drop and not feel like he must throw the ball once he gets there, because the timing will be off on something if he doesn't. They want to give him the flexibility to be able to read what the defense is doing, have the defense react to what he does as a playmaker, and then have him be able to react back in real time and kind of make those plays, which is what choice routes are all about.
Your gut feeling, if Deshaun Watson stays on the field for 16, 17 games, what do you think the narrative and reaction will be to Deshaun Watson? So if he's healthy enough to play.
Yeah, so if he's healthy enough to play, I think there'll be a 12 to 13 win team. And I think people will still ask questions about, is he still that guy, or is he being like, you know how it's funny where all the conversation about the Browns is around, can Deshaun Watson stay healthy and will he be good? I think by the end of the year, people are going to have the question of, well, obviously Deshaun Watson's going to be able to win games because the team's good, but is it about him or not, right? That's what we're going to switch to. It's inevitable. It's like such an obvious play that they're going to move to that if this team's record is what their record should be if he's healthy. Because, again, he's not indicated that he is a barrier to the Cleveland Browns' success. You can argue whether he's been somebody who's enabled that success, but his win-loss record tells you you can obviously win games with him. The question is, if he does get to that record, maybe he doesn't beat the Chiefs, maybe he doesn't beat the Eagles, and then people use that as a reason to justify him not playing that well, or that the Browns aren't going to be that good, or whatever it is. But I think that's what the narrative's going to be, quite frankly. Like, until he does it in the playoffs at a high level, a lot of people are just going to be where they are with him.
Just get the W's, put them in a wheelbarrow, and crate them up to the big board to hang them up, and doesn't matter. Just get the wins. Quincy Carrier, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Quincy.
Thank you.
Quincy Carrier, make sure you check him out. Always really good Brown stuff, untitled, unfiltered. Make sure you check him out. We're going to step aside. We'll continue talking Browns. Casey Kinnamon from Dog Pound Daily and the Barking Browns podcast straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Moneymaker from the Ohio Lottery has no interest in beating around the bush. Money Maker. You play the game, you could win money. Up to $2 million. With more than $88 million in prizes from $50 to $500. Moneymaker cuts right to the cash. Unlike this guy.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports for CLE. So take a look, the last 5 weeks of the schedule for the Browns. They have the 3 road division games sandwiched between the Chiefs and the Dolphins. So you've got Patrick Mahomes and Mike McDaniel's track team around the 3 AFC North road games. Let's welcome in Casey Kinnamon, Dog Pound Daily, as well as the Barking Browns podcast. Casey, I looked at that and I was like, oh, well, better stack those wins early because you're going to need them come the end of the season.
Yeah, the schedule drops and you focus on the beginning, and you kind of like the way it lays out, and you could see you get to the bye maybe 7-2 or 6-3. But when you really focus in on those final 5 games, that is a brutal stretch. Starting with going to Pittsburgh, a place that you haven't won in the regular season since 2003. So think what you want of the Steelers organization, their roster, but they're going to be more competitive than you want them to be, and that is just a house of horrors for the Browns. You don't have to think too far back to week 2 of last year to remember that. And then the following week you get to welcome the defending world champs. Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and Travis Kelce. Anyone who thinks that's going to be these games delusional. That's tough. And then just 4 days later, travel to Cincinnati for your second divisional road game in 3 weeks. That's a tough ask. It's also the second Thursday night game in a month.
Yeah.
That's just a tough ask to your body, regardless of how you match up with a certain team. And then you come home for the most advantageous matchup of the final 5, in my opinion, the Miami Dolphins, who is the fastest team I've ever seen in the history of the league. They know how to maximize their speed schematically, but it is a South Florida team coming north to play a night game in late December. You like that matchup a little more. But then kudos to the schedule makers, man. And then this thing in Baltimore, a game that I believe could have massive consequence. Not just the AFC North, but playoff seeding in general. That is quite the season cap right there. And you already have 4 primetime games. That could be your 5th.
Right. And again, it breaks for you a little bit before the bye. You get the bye week 10. It's not ridiculously early again. Right before the bye, there's the 3 home games. You mentioned this. So primetime games for every NFL team 2024. The Cowboys, Jets, and Niners have 6. Ravens, Bengals, 7 other teams have 5. Browns, Steelers, 4 other teams have 4. So, and they backload most of those primetime games second half of the season for the Browns as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think 3 was probably the consensus of what you were looking at. You get 4. You'd prefer 2 of those not be Thursday nights, though. That's just, it's a tough ask, man. Getting these car crashes on Sunday and then have your guys ready for Thursday. That's tough to ask your body. Now, you get that little mini bye on the back end. And both times that the Browns play on Thursday night, like you have a wider gap because you play on Monday night after the first one. So you get even longer rest. And then Sunday night after the second Thursday night game. So the back end, you kind of reap a little benefit, but it's tough on your body. But being on 4 primetime games, I think that this is where you're at. This is the weight of expectations, and this is what the league thinks of you. And now it's time to perform on the big stage.
And the other thing is, Kevin Stefanski has done a pretty good job with those short windows, and they've I don't want to say they figured it out. They've done pretty well with short rest.
Yeah, and this will be the most they've had to face it, though. So this will be more added challenges. And, playing the Bengals on Thursday night after coming off a game playing the Chiefs, that's a tough ask. The Bengals play the Titans the week before. I think you'd rather trade places with them in that case.
So this is from the Bleacher Report. Best matchups in each of the first 8 weeks of the season. Week 6, they like the Browns at the Eagles. Eagles will be coming off an early bye week, while the Browns have only played one team that had made the playoffs. Will have only played one team that has made the playoffs last season. Will be a big test for both teams. That one in Philadelphia as well. So it's a road game for the Browns. And yeah, that'll be an interesting one.
Yeah, it's not just a road game; it's your 3rd straight road game. So, you'll be tested there. I think it's a very physical game. They're built very similar. You look at how they are built from the inside out. The line of scrimmage on both those units. I think that's going to be a very physical game. And even though they haven't played since 2020, they're super familiar with each other just from the past 2 off seasons having those joint practices. And they've gotten heated both times. So there's a little rivalry there, just from how they've had to go at it. Now they actually get to do it for real, and it should be a very entertaining game and a good litmus test for both teams.
All right, before we go to break, one good thing, one bad thing from each team's 2024 schedule. This from CBS Sports. One good thing, the Browns went 8-1 at home last season, so they're likely happy with the fact that they'll get more than a month without leaving Cleveland. From week 7 to week 10, Browns have 3 straight home games and a bye. Means they won't have to leave Cleveland from October 14th through November 16th. One bad thing, if the Browns are in playoff contention going into December, they might end up falling down the stretch because their final 5 games are brutal. We've already talked about it. They close with the Steelers, Chiefs, Bengals, Dolphins, and Ravens, the AFC North foes all away. But yeah, you've got like a homestand and then a brutal road trip.
Yeah. Well, you got 3 road games right before the 3 home games. And you like the way the schedule opens up with non-playoff teams. But then even that 3 home game stand where you're there for a month, there's no layups in there. I mean, you got Cincinnati, Baltimore, and then the Chargers, who the Browns have had crazy battles with these last few years. So those are going to be 3 tough games. But when we look at that final stretch, it is very difficult. But if you are a team of consequence, like I believe the Browns to be, that's where you get battle tested going into the playoffs. The best teams always play their best football after Thanksgiving. Well, after Thanksgiving, the volume gets turned up on the Browns' schedule, so they're going to know who they are going into the postseason. Based on that, and that's how you sell it to yourselves. If you're the Browns, you just look at that competition. Yeah, it's tough, but that's what you signed up for. And if you're the team I believe them to be, I think that just sharpens your blade going into the postseason.
The other thing is we'll do our usual schedule when it's released. Yep. Disclaimer: yep. Injuries will always affect the way these things lay out. Look at what I mentioned earlier. Who thought you'd face Clayton Tune as a quarterback? So you never know what it's going to end up being.
Yeah, we're basing this on what we know of the teams now and what they could be, but there's still unknown factors. You know, we talk about that home stretch. We don't know what the Chargers are going to be under Harbaugh. Like that could be completely different than what you're envisioning. And like you said, injuries change everything for you and the opponent. You know, so a ton of unknown factors. But just based on what we do know, the Browns drew a short straw at the end of the year.
Casey Kinnamon from Dawg Pound Daily, as well as the Barking Browns podcast. Now I can step aside, take a quick time out, other side of the break. Potential breakout candidate plus one free agent every NFL team should go after. We'll tell you who they think the Browns should try to sign. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Moneymaker from the Ohio Lottery has no interest in beating around the bush. Money maker. You play the game, you could win money. Up to $2 million. With more than $88 million in prizes from $50 to $500. Moneymaker cuts right to the cash. Unlike this guy.
We continue talking Browns with Casey Kinnamon from Dawg Pound Daily, as well as co-host of the Barking Browns podcast. Potential breakout candidates for all 32 NFL teams. This is from yardbarker.com. They say Jerry Jeudy. Jeudy has never quite reached stardom in 4 seasons with the Broncos. Between injuries, poor quarterback play, at the very least, he should get plenty of single coverage opposite Amari Cooper. You know, that Casey, when I thought of that, I'm like, well, you know, Amari Cooper, it's kind of a mixed bag, though. You had Elijah Moore, who you had high hopes for, and he didn't quite live up to the hopes that you had for him last year after the Browns traded for him. You had Amari Cooper, he just keeps being productive. So I'm curious as to what Kevin Stefanski and the offense can do with Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah, I'm tempering my expectations based on the exercise I went through last year with Elijah Moore and seeing how that played out. But we did our way too early predictions this last Tuesday on the Barking Browns, and we all kind of saw Jeudy similar. I'm looking at a year at about 850 yards and 6 touchdowns. Now, while someone might hear that and think that's disappointing, I see that as encouraging because while he might be a wide receiver 2 for this team, I think he's the third passing option behind Cooper and David Njoku. You know, so I think that 850 will feel impactful. You know, and something you really didn't have last year. And I expect a bigger year out of Moore from an efficiency standpoint, even though they might see less looks. You know, so it's just the way you look at it. You know, breakout, I don't know if that really classifies. I think he'll have a good, efficient year, and he'll be a very important piece of this offense. But I don't know if people will leave the season thinking, well, you know, Judy's on the cusp of becoming a star, just based on how many mouths there are to feed in this offense. You know, so if I were to name a breakout candidate for this team, I look at it, Martin Emerson. And I don't think he has to have a better year than he had last year. But if he duplicates that same kind of year, I think he'll get all the accolades he should have gotten last year and be on the precipice of being one of those guys.
I'm really intrigued by Jeudy. I remember him at Alabama. The quarterback play, it hadn't been great in Denver. So I'm intrigued. I'm with you, though. I expected a lot more out of Elijah Moore. So you never assume, you know, bringing a guy and plopping him in that he'll take off. This one from USA Today. One free agent for every NFL team entering the summer that they should sign. For the Browns, they go defensive end Shaq Lawson. Lawson, still a solid veteran edge rusher to pad the depth on your roster. Cleveland, being able to bring in Lawson would, off the bench, would rotate in with Zadarius Smith, would be a nice play. I got nothing against Shaq Lawson, but I don't think he's going to take away any reps from Alex Wright. I think they really like what they saw from Alex Wright.
And Ogbo Okoronkwo, I don't see it. Like Shaq Lawson's a decent player, but I have no notes for this defensive line. I don't know how they're going to build it any better. And like you said, I don't want to hinder Alex Wright's development. As strong as he came on towards the end of the year last year, you know, you got to keep that kid in rotation. You got Ogbo as a pass rushing demon coming in off the bench, you know, to go with Zadarius and Miles. I don't see room for Shaq Lawson. If you want to get me excited about a free agent, give me Logan Thomas at tight end. That's an area I think you can improve. And I don't see it at defensive end. You know, injuries could happen and you could find a role for Shaq Lawson. But as it's constructed right now here today, I don't see a room for him on this roster.
Yeah, I'm with you with the tight end. I'm just you'd like a little more depth to that, and I think they're going to minimize the tight end position not named David Njoku. I think they're going to see more 3. You might even see more 4 wide receiver sets in empty backfield. This one's kind of interesting. 33rd team, so it's former NFL executives, player personnel guys. Every team's record prediction for 2024. They go 9-8 for the Browns. Cleveland's schedule is more challenging this season. Deshaun Watson's health still a question mark. Expect the Browns to play well, but fall short of their 11 wins from last season. I'm curious as to why they're going to fall short. They played 4 different. They won with 4 different quarterbacks. So is this? It's Cleveland. So expect them to fall short of expectations. Is that the missing line in that analysis?
Yeah, I'd say you probably nailed it on the head there. Is 9-8 like among the options? Yeah, but that's the basement for this roster. Like that's the basement floor. I don't see it, man. I just this roster's too talented, and they're all ascending. Like they're all hitting their primes at the same time. I think they're only going to improve from year to year at this point. So 9-8, that would be an abject disaster for me. I think I look at this, even with the schedule. The schedule is tougher, but I think you're better. You know, I look at this as a 12-5, maybe even a 13-4 type outcome if you get good play. If you get bad play out of the quarterback, I think that's what you're looking at, 9-8. So maybe that's just part of the Watson tax. Yeah,
the other thing, again, it's a tougher schedule. I would assume, you know, and I shouldn't assume, normally injuries kind of even out year to year, year over year. I can't imagine the Browns being onto their 4th and 5th tackles, going through 4 quarterbacks, you know, losing their main ball carrier. I think they're due for some health.
Well, knock on some wood, Dave. Same.
Yeah.
I think that's like you couldn't have the disaster of injuries, the litany of injuries you had last year. You know, even if it's just slightly better, I think you would take that outcome. Last year was crazy, and you still kept the boat afloat, kept winning games, kept stacking wins, kept coming up with ways to win, just based on the overall talent of this roster and the belief they have within themselves. So if you get better health, I think you're going to get an even better outcome.
All right, this one from Pro Football Network, NFL Power Rankings, every team's must-watch game of the 2024 season. They go Chiefs 1, 49ers 2, Eagles 3, Bengals 4. They have the Ravens 7th. They have the Browns at 16 behind the Jaguars, Bears. They have the Cowboys at 13. Must-watch game, Week 9 versus the Chargers. Cleveland and Los Angeles have given us instant classics to the past 3 years. 37-32 Chargers win 2021. 30-28 Bolts victory in 2022. Can the Browns get their revenge in another back-and-forth affair in 2024? Again, I think the question that they have is Deshaun Watson. And I said it last segment, I'll say it again. And if he stays on the field for 16 games, 17 games, I think you're going to be happy with the quarterback play you get.
Yeah, and not forget, I mean, they were 4-1 in the games he started and finished last year. They were well on their way to a playoff berth, even with him at quarterback not playing at an optimal level. You know, so once again, 16th, this is same as the last thing, is this is the Watson tax. The reality is this is a top 6 roster. I mean, at worst, I think that's just the reality of the situation where they're at. But I do like their call out of the Chargers game, because the Browns and Chargers have had wildly exciting games the last few times they've matched up. You know, and we don't know what the Chargers are going to be under Harbaugh. They'll be hard-nosed. Will it take a long time to transform them into what he wants them to be? Herbert is a very, very talented quarterback. You know, so I figure they'll find a way to marry that together. So it'll be interesting. I do anticipate that being an exciting game, just based on the way the last couple ones have turned out.
Yeah, I expect Herbert to take a pretty big step forward relative to, and he's talented. I think the production is going to match the talent with Harbaugh. All right, before I let you go, I'm curious to your thoughts. How different do you think this offense looks with Ken Dorsey and what they've done? And we keep hearing that they're trying to marry it to Deshaun Watson. What are we seeing more of? What are we seeing less of?
Well, it's got to start with motion. This team was very stagnant in motion last year, and you look across the league, you look at the teams that are being inventive. That's a big thing. Talked about the Dolphins and all that team speed, but it's not just the speed; it's the fact they maximize it schematically by moving people around. And you start to see that with the successful teams that are being inventive on offense. The Rams, the 49ers, focus on that. They need to implement more of that into their game, and I think you see that out of Judy. I think Judy's going to be a person. You'll see him on the outside some, but you're going to see him in the slot a lot, and they're going to use him to be a detector of what defenses are doing just by how they use him, get him in motion. I think you're going to be in shotgun a great deal, and you're going to look to open things up. And from everything you're hearing, Dorsey's really taking command of this coaching staff. And Stefanski's kind of taking a step back and letting him head up the meetings, letting him gather all the ideas and marry it together. So it's going to have to look different. They've stripped it down to the studs in the coaching staff. And regardless if it's Stefanski calling the plays, if the schemes are going to be wildly different, so it's going to look different. Now, we'll see if it feels different over the course of the season, if they have to fall back into some old tropes, if they had some rough patches. But just based on all the changes, I can't see it looking anything like we're used to in years past.
Casey Kinnamon from Dog Pound Daily and the Barking Browns podcast, as always. Great stuff. Thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much, Casey.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dave.
Casey Kinnamon, make sure you read them. Pages of Dog Pound Daily. You can also check out the Barking Browns podcast. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.